See, you've been talking about this calorie restriction, and you've been eating less calories than you need to. But the thing is that you also hosted a presentation from Camille Pablis, if I remember Pablis, if I'm pronouncing his name right. So he visited your podcast, and he talked about the impact of short-lived controls on calorie restriction. And basically, as he went through it, he found that the calorie restriction that they show in the animals only works in the really small animals, like basically the lowest weight animals. So for any one of the 4 interventions they did, whether it's in yeast cells or fruit flies or mice, the top 10% have no benefit from calorie restriction at all. And these are even in the animals. And it's only in the bottom 10% by weight that get any benefit from it. And so a natural question out of that is, are humans more like fat rats or like lean rats? How long do we live for our size? Well, this has already been answered. Here's a statistical analysis that went through, and it measured every animal they could find on how long it lived versus how much it weighed. And you can see down there in the lower left, we have mice underperforming the amount of time that you would expect them to live given their body weight. And then all the way at the upper top of it, we see humans who live much longer than you would expect for our physical size. In fact, we live 5 times as long as would be expected just based off of our weight. So when we're trying to compare ourselves to these fruit flies or other things, none of them live anywhere as long as a human does, just based off of how long you would expect something to live based off of their weight. And then if we go further into that, one of the natural places to look is you're thinking about longevity. And you mentioned this is one of the things that should be on the tiers is the mortality based on body weight for a human. So if it was true that eating low calories for an extended period of time was the key to longevity, then naturally you would be seeing that the people who weigh the least would then live the longest. But we don't see that at all. In fact, the people who weigh the least actually die 50%, have a 50% higher all-cause mortality than people who have a normal BMI of between 20 and 25. So it only starts to go up, as we mentioned before, when you start to get into a heavy BMI. But if you're in a normal range, there's really not that much benefit from eating less calories. And you could say, well, I'm doing calorie restriction. I'm not just losing weight. Well, the people who are doing calorie restriction, almost all of them are very low BMI, an average of around 18 or so, which is at the point that it's significantly increased all-cause mortality. And this has already been, data has already been cleaned to remove the smoking people. One way to lose weight, unfortunately, is to smoke. It's also been corrected for the level of activity and exercise and class and age and other things. So this is basically saying that the humans that are living in the normal range can't get any additional benefit just from trying to reduce their calories and live a life of deprivation. You want to go ahead and give a swing back?
Yeah. So if we're starting with the 900-day rule, a major takeaway from that paper too was that CR was one of the few interventions to consistently allow mice to live longer than 900 days. So if median lifespan 900 days is a short-lived control, CR was one of the few interventions where consistently the mice live longer than 900 days. And if I can share screen here so I can show that data, can't share. You've got to give me share privileges. There we go. All right, hang on real quick. Yeah. So if you look at one of the recent studies that just came out, and I don't know, wait, let's see if you can see what I see. Let me go full screen. Yep. All right. Okay. So this study just came out, and there, for those who haven't seen it, videos on the channel. The importance of this study, and not to say this is any different from the 900-day rule, but it's additive because this is recently published. So it wasn't available when Camille's group published his data. Anyway, this study included 960 mice. So that's a key point because when you look at any lifespan studies, if your 2 groups or however many groups have 8 mice per intervention, or controls, it's not adequately powered to look at lifespan. So each of these 5 groups, eat as much as you wanted ad lib, 1 day of fasting, 2 days of fasting, 20% CR, 40% CR, 5 groups, 960 mice in total. Divide that by 5. That's how many mice were in each group. A lot of mice. And also it's in female mice, so I can't say anything about male mice in this study. So when you look at the 900-day rule, that's about 30 months right here, median lifespan. So compared to ad lib, you can see that relatively short-lived was, but an increase in lifespan relative to the short-lived ad lib, eat as much as you wanted, both 1 and 2 days of fasting. So maybe you can cross off 1 and 2 days of fasting as being potentially relevant because it increased lifespan relative to the short-lived controls who live shorter than 900 days. You could also make that same claim about, or actually where you start to see the lifespan curve go beyond 30 months, or sorry, now, then even 20% CR, you can see 20% CR median lifespan is right at 30 months, 900 days. So there too, you could say, okay, 20% CR, no extension of lifespan if you use the 900-day rule. And, basically your ad lib, those are short-lived controls. But then you can see 40% CR very clearly way past the 30-day rule. So you could say, okay, the 40% CR is pretty extreme. Almost nobody can handle that. And where I prefer nuance to everything you just mentioned is that while it's true that absolute CR is probably bad, right? You can't say eat as little as possible, have a BMI of 18, right? That's something I've never proposed ever, and I never would propose, right? It's find the body weight and body composition that's associated with your best biomarker profile in terms of how does that biomarker look? How do those biomarkers look in terms of youth and their association with all-cause mortality risk? So in other words, it used to be calorie restriction with optimal nutrition, CRON. I'd add to that CRON and optimal biomarkers. So chronob, right? So I guess I just learned a new phrase. And it's probably a terrible name. We can come up with other names. But highlight that point, just using this study again as an example. When using not the 30-day rule, but taking it even a step further and looking at mice that lived in any group past 35 months, which clearly beats the 30-day rule, right? So you can see that even in the mice that ate as much as they wanted, there was still a pretty good amount that lived longer than 35 months and got close to the more than 40 months, which is long lived for a mouse. And obviously, as you go up the groups, fasting, there are more mice in the both CR groups that live past 35 months. But the authors of this study then asked which biomarkers are associated with a longer lifespan without even looking at if the animals were CR or not, right? So the 1 day of fasting, they weren't CR. 2 days of fasting ended up being CR. So you have 2 groups that are essentially not CR and 3 groups that ended up being CR. So in terms of biomarkers that were associated with a longer lifespan, regardless of which group those mice were in, having higher levels of lymphocytes at a relatively young age, 16 months, associated with a longer lifespan. And on the other side, having a higher RDW, which as many people know on the channel, is a major predictor of biological age using Dr. Morgan Levine's biological age test, PhenoAge, having a higher value for that, regardless of group designation, was associated with a shorter lifespan. So these data aren't just in mice. This story is similar in people. The RDW increases during aging. This is in people again. And a relatively higher RDW is associated with an increased all-cause mortality risk. And conversely, lymphocytes decline during aging, just like they did in that giant mouse study, with lower levels of lymphocytes being associated with an increased all-cause mortality risk. So just to go back to your original point, it isn't an absolute CR where lower is better, get your BMI as low as possible. I look at it as find the magnitude of CR that's best associated with your most youthful and quote unquote healthy, lowest all-cause mortality risk biomarker profile. But then also, how do you feel? Because if you're tired and hungry, you're probably too extreme.